Calling to order the Brainerd Planning Commission special meeting Wednesday, May 26, 2021. This point of order, David, could we do a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Erickson.
Here.
Calroos. Foley. Woodward.
Here.
Yeager.
Yes.
Gorham. And Duval.
Here. All right, thank you. All righty, is there a member that'd like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
I will.
Thank you. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. At this time, are there any amendments to tonight's agenda? Otherwise, looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve. Yeager.
Motion Yeager, is there a second?
Second, Woodward.
Woodward, second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right. At this point, we're moving to item number 5 on our agenda. We'll have a public hearing here this evening. Let's begin here, David, if I could have some staff background on this.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So tonight, we're here to consider a requested rezoning and plan unit development on property just off of Beaver Dam Road, north of Northtown. In the findings of fact, you can see up on the screens. These are not currently addressed and non-platted parcels, but you can see their legal descriptions there. These parcels are owned and will be constructed by Country Manor. The city, we've been working with Country Manor for approaching 3 years on working on a project like this. They approached the city, I think it was in the fall of 2018, I believe, Brian.
That's about right.
When Country Manor first approached the city looking to build a site here in Brainerd. This project we've been working with them for the last 3 years. Vetting it from a staff's perspective, from the community development department, engineering, Brainerd Public Utilities, fire, police, administration have all been involved as we've worked with Country Manor to vet this project and help them through the development of this project. Over these 3 years, we've met with them probably around about a half dozen times, going over civils and basic site plan, zoning, things like that. They have been absolutely wonderful to work with. And what we're here to do tonight is looking for the commission to kind of have a review of this project. In just a minute, we'll hand it over to Brian and his team to go over what they're looking to do. And then also to hear from the public regarding input on the project. And then for the planning commission to discuss and send recommendations to the city council. I'll quickly go through a high-level walkthrough of my findings of fact that were placed in the packet for this evening. This site is currently zoned RA Rural Agricultural District, and there is a request to rezone it from RA to Planned Unit Development District. The purpose of this is that currently under an RA district, neither multifamily, high-density residential uses nor commercial daycare facilities are allowed in RA districts. And these are core elements of this project. According to the zoning code, the purpose and intent of a PUD district is to provide the integration and coordination of land parcels as well as the combination of various types of residential, commercial, and industrial uses. And that's what this project would be doing. Per section 515-76-2, it says all permitted accessory accessory or conditional uses contained in sections 51 through 71, that's all the residential, commercial, and industrial districts of the code, shall be treated as potentially permitted uses within the district. Per the PUD district, there are no lot width, lot length, area, setback, impervious surface of building use or design regulations within the PUD district. The purpose of that is to really kind of open up the possibilities of what could be done in such a district and a project, and really have that project be a kind of a negotiation, working back and forth with a potential developer and the city. Gives the city a little more, or I should say a lot more control over what's going to be done on a specific project, while also giving some flexibility with projects like this one that don't necessarily fit one box of either it's residential or commercial or industrial. It might cover multiple different potential uses that don't necessarily fit in one specific district. When considering a PUD proposal, as you will be doing tonight, the ordinance states in section 515-11, which governs the administration of plan unit developments, that the city may approve the plan unit development only if it is found the development satisfies all the following standards. And I'll go quickly through these standards. That the proposed PUD is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, and it gives some minimums that it does not conflict with the comprehensive plan when it comes to that it will not create an excessive burden on existing parks, schools, streets, or other public utilities. The residential elements of the development will solely serve, well in this case it is going to solely serve seniors. The development includes its own open space areas. The development includes site water storm management, and the development will connect to the city's sewer, water, and electrical system, and we as staff believe that it does not conflict in any of those areas. Additionally, the use is reasonably related to the overall needs of the city and is compatible with surrounding land uses. The planned unit development is effective and unified treatment of the development possibilities of the project site, and the development plans provide for the preservation of unique natural amenities such as streams, stream banks, wooded cover, rough terrain, and similar areas. The uses proposed will not have an undue or adverse impact on the reasonable enjoyment of the neighboring property. It will not be detrimental to surrounding uses. Additionally, under that, planning and development meets or extends the following criteria. That it would have more than two or more principal structures and be at least 2 acres in size. This proposal covers both. The use is consistent with the requirements of the zoning code. Again, we're looking to, in the current RA, this would not fit, and that's why they are requesting a rezoning to a PUD district. The planned unit development can be planned and developed to harmonize with existing or proposing development in the areas surrounding the project site. Each phase of the proposed development is of sufficient size, composition, and arrangement so that its construction, marketing, and operation are feasible as a complete unit, and that provision for and construction of dwelling units and common open spaces are balanced and coordinated. In addition, the total development is designed in such a manner as to form a desirable and unified environment within its boundaries. Financing is available to the applicant on conditions and in an amount which is sufficient to assure completion of the PUD. One individual has been designated by the property owners to be in control of the development. The planned unit development provides for architectural diversity by way of varied building types and exterior design. Underground utilities, it connects all its utilities, including but not limited to telephone, electric, gas, and cable television shall be installed underground. When it comes to water connections, that there are individual shutoffs. In sewer connections, that there are at least with more than one unit served, which exceeds 300 feet in length, that there's manholes, roadways. This is talking about when it comes to design roadways, if there are private roadways within the project, to be 28 feet or more in width, and shall be designed to permit city fire trucks to provide protection to each building. Again, these are all things that we have, staff has reviewed. The fire department has reviewed this as well for fire safety. Parking, and no portion of the required private road system may be used in calculating required off-street parking space or may be used for parking. Landscaping, there is a detailed landscape plan in your packet. It says the landscaping shall be provided according to a plan approved by the city, which shall include a detailed planning list with sizes and species indicated as part of the final plan. In assessing the landscape plan, the city council, who's the final authority on these, shall consider the natural features of the particular site, the architectural characteristics of the proposed structures, and overall scheme of the planned unit development. Public services, the proposed project shall be served by city sewer and water system, and fire hydrants shall be installed at such locations as necessary, provided for protection. Those are all included in this project. Refuse shall be picked up and there should be a plan provided to the city council. Per code, refuse must be picked up at a minimum of a weekly basis. When it comes to stormwater management, the best management practices are followed. Sidewalks and trails, except otherwise determined by the council, concrete sidewalks not less than 5 feet in width or bituminous trails not less than 8 feet in width shall be provided. Again, as this is a PUD, these are elements that can be required by the planning commission or to the city council, but can also be waived. And then finally, that there be a development agreement that would be enacted upon approval of this stage of the plan, reviewed, drafted by the city attorney, agreed upon by both the applicant and the city prior to a final stage plan being submitted. There are a couple of elements I want to point out that are outside. Okay, those are the main criteria. Some of the elements of this project I do want to point out. The first is, as you may see in the site plans and the surveys, that the northern sections of the site are within the Gilbert Lake Shoreland District. Per section 530.09, which is the shoreland ordinance of the city code, impervious surface coverage for lots within the shoreland district must not exceed 25%. Approximately 650,312 square feet, or just under 15 acres of the site, excluding the proposed Lot 1, Block 2, are within the shoreland district. Staff, as we were reviewing this, we did reach out to consultants that the city contracts with Swanson Haskamp Consulting. Also to kind of bounce some thoughts off of them and get their opinion on the situation. They said when it comes to calculating impervious surface, overall impervious surface for this project, they should be done by combining the 25% impervious surface restriction within the shoreland areas and combining that with the rest of the property that's not in the shoreland. We as staff, we did some calculations. We did it two ways. So again, because this is a planned unit development, it doesn't fall under any specific restrictions. In our code, we generally have two standards. You have the residential standard, which says on any residential lot, there should not be more than 60% impervious. And then for commercial and industrial lots, it does not list stormwater or impervious restriction. In part, mostly that's because when it comes to those projects, those are be thoroughly vetted by the city engineer, and they would likely have other stormwater mitigation factors that they would have to take. So we calculated doing two ways. Again, making doing it if this was a strictly residential project, we calculated it using the 60% that in the total project or the total acreage for this project, you would allow 49% impervious would be allowed across the entire project. If the commercial or industrial standard were to be applied, 75.75% of impervious would be allowed. Now we recognize that those are two pretty big differences. So at this development, as it is both commercial, has commercial elements as well as residential elements, staff at this time, we're recommending maybe for the planning commission to consider a 60% impervious, kind of cuts the difference. And that would allow for 27.7 acres total of impervious surface on this site. One thing I do want to point out is that planned unit developments, and this will be my final item before kind of going through the process really quick for the rest of how this would be reviewed. Planned unit developments are generally reviewed and approved in 3 phases. Per the code, would be a concept review, a development review, and a final plan review. Here today, we are requesting that the commission consider a development stage review, effectively skipping the plan review step. Per section 515-11-11D, the ordinance does allow for this. It states, in cases of single-stage plan unit developments or where the applicant wishes to begin the first stage of a multi-stage plan unit development immediately, they may, at their option, submit a development stage plans for the proposed PUD simultaneously with the submission of the general concept plan. In such case, the applicant should comply with all the provisions of this ordinance applicable to submission of the development stage plan. The Planning Commission and City Council shall consider such plans simultaneously and shall grant or deny development stage plan approval in accordance with the provisions of this section. Again, one of the reasons we are recommending kind of doing the step 1 and step 2 simultaneously concept with the development stage plan here is that staff, we have, as I stated earlier, been working with Country Manor for quite a long time, and we have thoroughly vetted this project from a land use perspective, from an engineering perspective, fire, PD. Have been looking at this project for a long time, and we feel that it's at a place where it can move forward. Additionally, this would also allow Country Manor to continue moving forward with their development process as well. Even with this situation, we're kind of skipping that step. It does allow, again, for the purpose of tonight to be to review it, make comments. Similar to things like a conditional use permit, the Planning Commission can make recommendations on elements that may be changed, or you feel like there should be additional things considered. You can make those recommendations tonight to the City Council before the City Council considers this for formal approval. How a PDU process would go, we'll be starting tonight with you as the Planning Commission to review it and to take public comment and make recommendations to the City Council. Upon receipt of the Planning Commission's recommendations, the City Council would then consider those recommendations and vote to whether or not to approve the planned unit development, and in this case, the development stage. Upon approval of this development stage, the city attorney would begin to prepare a development agreement which would stipulate any specific terms and conditions approved by the City Council and accepted by the applicant. Once that is done, a final stage plan covering the area designated in the development stage as the first stage of the PUD, or in this case, the single stage, shall be filed for review by the Planning Commission within 6 months of the date the City Council grants a development stage plan. This can be extended if necessary for an additional 6 months. So in that situation, we can kind of consider this similar to a plat process where it's going to go to the Planning Commission tonight for review, goes to the council for their review, any conditions are placed upon it, and then the applicant will submit one final plan before submitting for permitting to show that they are meeting any conditions that were placed in this stage of the process. What we're looking for the commission again tonight is to review this project, hear from the public, and then consider again 2 things. The first is to consider the requested rezoning of the site from RA Rural Agriculture to Planned Unit Development District. And then the second would be to consider approval of this development stage plan with any conditions the commission may seem appropriate, and send that to the City Council as a recommendation for approval. Mr. Chair, at this time I'll take any immediate questions that the commission may have. Otherwise, I encourage you to turn it then over to Mr. Brian Kelm, who's the CEO of Country Manor, and his team to walk you through the project.
Thank you, David. Are there questions of clarification or process for staff?
Real quickly, please.
Yes, Mr. Yeager.
I just want to ask the question regarding the impervious. The impervious for shoreline, is that or is that not established by the state? What I'm fuzzy on here is how the city is in a place of and it has the ability to make a judgment call on this impervious surface watershed regarding in the shoreland districts. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm going.
So
That's
this
my
is
question.
part of the city code.
Okay.
So the city adopts the shoreline ordinance. So in this case, it's the 2002 DN. It's roughly a version of the 2002 DNR ordinance, and then the city then adopts it to enforce it itself. In this situation, this is where it came from. Discussing with other consultants, Swanson Haskamp, who has done many projects like this, where in this situation, because normally most projects, a lot of times when you deal with shoreland, you're kind of the whole parcel is in shoreland. In this situation, because only a certain part of it is, that's where the recommendation came. How it's been implemented before for projects like this is to do the overall, kind of calculate one area and the overall, and then to combine them together of what the overall would be allowed.
Understood.
And then they can kind of spread that out as they see fit.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you. Righty, so with that, David, I'm going to open the public hearing, and we'll go to our applicants first. So I open the public hearing at 7:21. And first off, I'd like to welcome our applicant team here. And if you could, your name, please, and then if you could step us through the proposal here and what you feel are the important points that you want us to consider as we go through this tonight.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll start off. My name is Brian Kelm, and I serve as the CEO of the organization. And I just want to say thank you for allowing us to meet with you tonight, this special meeting. As Mr. Chansky and Mr. Sandy have known, we've been meeting for a few years now, and the pandemic really put a screeching halt to a lot of things. And in our industry, we're still coming out of it, but we're very thankful for where we are. So we just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Along with me tonight is Evan Larson from GLTA, Scott Kehoe, who's our project manager for our Country Manor organization, and Corey Garrett, who is president and owner of Alliance Builder Corp., who will be our contractor if we're fortunate enough to build up here. So with that, give you a little background on Country Manor. We were founded in 1970, and it was a 60-bed nursing home when it was founded, Sartell, Minnesota. And since then, we've developed it to a 25-acre campus. We have 165 skilled beds. We have 241 senior apartments. We have a home health agency that serves approximately 250 people in central Minnesota. We have Champion Rehab, who does both inpatient and outpatient services on our campus in central Minnesota. We have a child daycare center that serves 149 children from 6 weeks through 12 years of age. We have a convenience store called the Country Store that's 5,000 square feet, has a doctor's clinic in it. It has Good to Go in it and a number of items that you would see in a typical convenience store. And we also have Drake's, which is a fine food and spirits, which is a sit-down restaurant. All of these amenities that you've heard, and maybe some of them that I missed, that are in the brochure, we didn't do to put a feather in our hat. It's about our mission. Our mission is to enrich the quality of life of the people we serve by providing superior health care and services. And so these amenities we found through the years were extremely important for the people that we serve. If we look at child daycare, it's a service for our staff, it's a service for our general community, but it's also intergenerational activities on the campus. The convenience of having a doctor's clinic and a convenience store for the folks that we serve is a big deal. Having a restaurant is another big deal. We have non-emergency transportation to get them back and forth to their doctor's appointments and to do their errands. So again, this 25-acre campus that was developed was really for those folks based off our mission. And we're very thankful that we've been able to do that. Back in 2017, we opened up a second campus. It's called Woodcrest of Country Manor, and it's located in St. Joe, Minnesota. We felt as we moved outside of our boundaries, we wanted to have a building close enough that we could quickly get to help support in case we'd miss something. And so that is an 84-unit complex. It has 60 apartments, 24 memory care. And what we're doing up here, what we're planning and proposing up here is very similar. But that has been a big success for us. That filled quick, and we've had good success, good satisfaction, and we've been very pleased. And so the next question for us is, where do we go next? And after we did a lot of research and the cordial hospitality that we had in Brainerd, and also it being about an hour from our building, we felt this was a wonderful opportunity for us. We saw a need. We see the Brainerd Lakes area as a whole. When we look at people that we would serve, it goes beyond the borders of the city limits. We think a lot of folks that live out on the lakes within a 30-mile radius might consider our campus as they begin to look at that next phase of life. And we just really believe that this would be a wonderful opportunity for us to come to Brainerd and put up our next campus. And so with that, before we turn it over to Evan to go through the project itself, is there any questions from the Planning Commission in regards to who Country Manor is?
Questions? No, thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Evan, and we'll tag team this, but I'm going to let him walk you through the project so you get a sense on what we're planning and proposing.
Sounds good. Again, Brian introduced me. I'm Evan with GLT Architects. This is actually a 2017 job number for us, so
There you go.
we've been working on this for a while. And as mentioned, we had a little hiatus during COVID here. So the project happens to be very well developed because of that. So we're coming to you with pretty well final plans in the sense that normally we might be coming in with some kind of preliminary or schematic design level documents, but due to our kind of time delay there, we're actually at a fully developed set. So what you'll see today is pretty complete. So I'll start out with some of the plan documents that were in your packet, and then I'll go to some maybe more pretty pictures to give you a better sense for what the campus will really look like. But just kind of starting out with those plan documents in your packet there, the plat. We have access off of Beaver Dam Road over here to the west, and then the right-of-way access there would be a future city street access, as would the connection off of Warrior, I believe. Is that correct? To the south. And then a shorter connection and allowing a connection off to the east, so those right-of-way connections. The site itself, as developed high level, coming in off of the Beaver Dam Road, follows the right-of-way and then diverts to be a private drive, but leaves access in that road for the future city street as that may be developed in the future. This road again here is just showing that potential right-of-way, and if the city were to continue developing that north of this property that's allotted for, it's not going in at this time and not planned for this development, as with this extension to the southeast. I'll go into each sheet just really quickly. Again, I welcome any questions, but I don't want to bore you with every sheet or whatever, but I'll high level hit these, and please ask me any questions as we go. Stormwater on site. There's multiple locations where all stormwater is managed on site, and I'll switch to a little bigger pen here so maybe you can see it a little better. So kind of through here, and through here. So all the stormwater is managed on site. We head down to utility plan, erosion control utilities. We're connecting off the city utilities off of those two extensions to the south, both water and sanitary sewer. Storm sewer, again, just managed within those ponds on site. Too elaborate to go over on some of these plans. It was mentioned that in your packet is a fairly developed landscape plan document. I do have access to those too if you wanted to go through any of those in detail. But I think at this point I'll jump over to my colored plans, and then I could go back to any of these more detailed documents if you'd like at any time. But I'll start out quickly with kind of an overview of the campus. So this is just an overhead shot of the campus. Coming in from the west over here, the extension off of Beaver Dam Road. This is the main entrance into the campus, what we would call Town Square, where we have a lot of amenities for the campus, which would be a chapel space, salon space, a small retail area, exercise room. What am I missing?
Yeah, and so when we say a chapel space, in Sartell, we have a chapel that's similar in size. In pre-pandemic, we were worshiping over 400 folks a week. And so we did have some community members that started to worship with us. And so this facility would probably have the ability to worship 150 per service, somewhere in there. We have large lounges for folks to be able to do all kinds of different activities. We have dining areas that we broke up. So instead of a big cafeteria, you see small dining rooms like you would see in a restaurant, where we seat 30 to 50 people in each of the areas instead of all of them in one area. We have the salon. We have a small retail area, so folks that need the pick-me-ups can come down and do their thing, and they can get coffee and some of the other convenience items there. So that would be the main part of that area.
As you first approach the campus, off to the left here this is the small daycare portion of the project. You see in the back here the kind of play area. Just beyond that is the mid-level apartment, senior apartment facility, and I'll zoom into some of those in more detail. Just beyond that is a little more upper end apartment, senior apartment, and then off to the lower part over here, that's the memory care wing. So just quickly I'll show you a few. So approaching the campus, that's that town square area that we were talking about, drop-off canopy area. To the right would be memory care. These are new to Brian too, you haven't seen
No,
these
I
either.
haven't
So,
seen these. They're the latest and greatest.
so again, that drive under to our left would be the middle level apartments. This would be the entrance to the daycare area.
Right now, we're proposing license capacity of 92 children, 8 infants, 14 toddlers, 2 rooms of 20 preschoolers, and 30 after-schoolers.
Entrance and front view of the mid-level apartments. Senior apartments, yeah.
Right now, that's 62 units. And if you're wondering what's the difference between a mid-level or mid-America apartment and an upper-end apartment, we looked at stewardship for the mid-level. So we tried to drive that price down on the rent as much as we could. So the heating and cooling system's gonna be different. You're gonna see through wall air conditioners in the mid-level. You're gonna see boiler heat there. You're gonna see a little difference in the finishes. You're not gonna see decks. You're not gonna see a second bathroom in the unit. And so our goal was to drive the rent as low as we could on this section to make it affordable, functional and affordable.
And this is the back of that area. Kind of an overhead view. And you'll see in the foreground up here, this set of apartments have detached garages available. This would be the entrance to the upper level apartments. Those feature the tuck under garages, balconies, as Brian mentioned, a few more amenities within. You'll see this Mini featured prominently several times. Our lead designer drives a white Mini, so it just so happens that he sneaks it in everywhere. Every project has a white Mini in it. So this is towards the back of the project, and I'll go back to an overview and show you where that is, but the back of that upper level, which is kind of over here. This is the back side of Town Square, where there's some dining areas. As Brian mentioned, they're kind of broken up, and you can see we're kind of purposely breaking up that area into little smaller segments instead of one big area, both in kind of a, I figure we were calling them parlors, which are kind of small seating areas with TVs, and you can watch a game or do that sort of activity, or the dining rooms. Oops, blasted through that one.
What we find in our experiences is having all this common space is very therapeutic for the people that we serve. Obviously, they need a place to live, an apartment, but they want to get out and about and socialize and feel like they have purpose. And so having a large amount of common space for them to engage in many different things is very important, and that's what we focus on and makes us a little bit different than some of the other providers that you may encounter.
This is the backside of memory care, so there's a fenced-in area to allow outdoor activities and allow to get out without having security issues or safety issues.
I just note that there's a brand-new licensure in the state of Minnesota that's going to take effect August 1st of this year. All senior housing buildings, if you're going to be providing healthcare services, will need to be licensed as assisted living. There's 2 different levels, assisted living and assisted living with memory care. This entire campus we're planning to have licensed. We may need to have a couple of different addresses, but all of these buildings would be licensed so that we could provide that care for those folks as they age in place.
And what that means from a building standpoint is the entire complex is built to a higher standard than a standard apartment unit. So as we go through city plan review for looking at building codes and that, it's actually built to a high occupancy, which gives us higher requirements for fire safety, life safety, sprinkler protection, that sort of thing. So some of the areas that are affected with that. This is a view within that memory care courtyard. So the other thing I do have with me is actually a live view of that. And it doesn't render out, it's not showing the landscaping because my computer just simply can't handle it. So the renderings that you saw earlier show a better representation of landscaping and some of those things. But had this available, should you be interested in seeing or viewing anything specific, I can go anywhere you'd like, but as an overview of that campus, is kind of how it looks. Now, one thing to point out is Brian mentioned a campus in St. Joseph. the goal of the project, or one of the high-level goals of the project, is to have a nice open campus with lots of landscaping and open areas. So, you know, that was, you know, hopefully it's demonstrating through those images and stuff, but that's a very important part of the project, is to have that openness and green space and landscaping, and have those that outside amenities.
Right. As we age, our senses decline, so whether it's ambulating, walking, your sight, your hearing, your taste, they all change. And so what we found is providing an environment that allows them to feel more comfortable. You know, a city environment's gonna get a lot of folks more revved up, stressed. And this will allow them to see wildlife, allow them to ambulate, take their walks, hear the children, but may or may not participate. Hear some of the neighborhood activities, may or may not want to participate. So again, having that extra acreage is really an amenity for these folks.
So it's kind of high level. Again, we're absolutely happy to go into any detail or back up to any plan or discuss anything you'd like to. So,
Thank you. Are there specific questions for the applicant?
Got a question.
Yes, Mr. Erickson.
I think on one of the earlier renderings, so the road coming from the parking lot to the main entrance that leads directly to Beaver Dam, in one of the earlier renderings, there was a road headed south to Warrior, and I don't see that on some of those.
I can
What do you add?
speak a little bit to that. So the plan was, and we were talking with them, is we wanted to maintain our access and plat right-of-way. And so the right-of-way you're seeing would be just an empty space right-of-way like we see in other developments that isn't built. Country Manor's, I think, plan is to continue to operate private roads within their facility, and still leaving the city the option, if necessary, to construct roads in the future through that site so that we can maintain the access to some of those parcels to the north and over to the east. So that's just planned right-of-way. All the roads within this PUD itself would be considered private at this point.
Okay, so as a part of this project, that Warrior connection wouldn't be a part of it?
Correct,
At
it's
this-
just a platted right-of-way for any type of future.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
I have three.
All right, go with one for starts.
We'll go quickly. My question about the daycare aspect, is the daycare limited to only staff, or the family of staff, or is the daycare open to the general public as well?
It would be open to the general public.
Okay, so my question stems from the PUD aspect says solely to serve seniors. And I'm just wondering, maybe David, you can answer this, how that.
So that was a piece I declare I added. That was a piece that wasn't actually in the ordinance. That was a mistype that I was meaning to drop in and didn't write. It meant to be underneath that.
Okay.
Speaking of that it's this facility is not going to specifically, but it meant to be underneath that piece that talked about is not going to be excessive burden on schools, parks, all those other things, to say this project in and of itself is not going to add 1,000 students to the school district or something like that.
Okay, understood. Do I get my second one?
Get it, yeah, I'll give you two now.
Okay. The question probably for the architect, was there a metric or a calculus that was used to establish your number of parking stalls and the size of the parking lot? And if so, what was that?
yeah, you know, we're with the fortune of having a campus that's very similar. We've got very good data from parking counts from that, and then looking back at kind of a typical count for projects like this is what we based it on. I don't necessarily have those today, but I could certainly share with more detail on how they're established. But ultimately, the residents have access to parking within their areas. For example, the tuck under garages provide the majority of the parking for residents within the upper level. The detached area, we didn't talk much about that, but let me jump over there quick. There's parking available for residents within their site as well for the mid-level apartment and the detached garages, so we're accommodating those within their specific areas. And then the daycare actually has more of a staff parking area towards the front here. And then we've worked a drop-off lane coming through and around so that this parking across the front is kind of dedicated to that daycare staff. So to directly answer your question, it's kind of broken up into each area and then determine how much parking is needed per space, whether it's daycare, how much is needed for common area. There can be times when there's an activity in the chapel space. Maybe there's a service or, you know, or a community activity going on in there where there's a larger group of people parking in the main lots. We have to perhaps oversize that just a bit to allow for those peak activities. I think day to day, and maybe Brian, you want to address, you know, what you guys see in the St. Joe campus. I think as far as parking counts is kind of how we based it on.
Well, as you mentioned, the majority of the time it's your staff and then the family visitors that come in to visit their loved ones. And when you go beyond that, the parking is set up to allow for special events. Being that we don't want to be out on the road, city streets and so forth, we try to allow that. So if we have a holiday gathering, a funeral is a big event. Any type of big event, we want to make sure we have enough parking stalls so people can easily navigate in and out of the campus.
We're also accommodating, you can see there's a little bit of growth potential, for example, off of memory care, and there could be a little growth here and there. So that core area is kind of sized to accommodate.
You're using mostly historical data off other projects. Correct. Yeah. Do I get my third one?
You may have a third.
Excellent.
You're lucky
And
man.
you all are gonna be amazed at the broad spectrum of my questions. So now I'm gonna go to lighting. I saw on the lighting fixture schedule that the height of the poles and blah blah blah, but I didn't see anything listing on there the color of the light. So you may not know this, and that's perfectly fair. But my question is on all of the exterior lighting for the entire campus, if there is a color in mind, a temperature in mind for all of the exterior lighting.
Not to put you on the spot, Scott, but do you recall the color temp on those? When you,
At least 4,000 K ran in my mind.
that'd be probably one we would be guessing at and have to get you a better answer with a,
Perfect.
yeah.
Those are my questions.
Yep. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Other questions for the applicant?
I've got
Mr.
one
Erickson.
more, if I could. To the south of the memory care unit, in that green space between the memory care unit and the properties to the south along Twin Street, what do you have planned for that space? Have you considered like tree planting, vegetative buffers, any kind of berms, to kind of buffer that between those properties?
There's currently quite a bit of plantings and natural growth within that area. It's actually fairly dense, not necessarily big trees, but there's quite a few smaller. I'm not even sure, you're better with trees than I am probably, what species, but they're, our intent was to leave that fairly natural through there. And I guess I don't have any images of that area. Maybe you're familiar with that area specifically, but there's quite a bit of growth and
There is lots of pine trees, cedar trees in there, and it's fairly thick once you move to the north off the housing development. And we have no intentions of removing any of the natural. If we would ever develop, our past history has always been to be very respectful, so we would put some type of planning that would be an agreement, so we would have a screening or something that would be acceptable by the city if we'd ever do a phase 2 and bring things a little closer to that development.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chair, I do believe that James is working on pulling up either a GIS or Street View to
got
give
it
you an
right
idea
here
what
if
it
you
currently looks like.
I got it open right here for him if he wants to see it. Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, if you look at this, where most of the development is going to happen is here in this area. I think maybe a little bit in here, but then all of this, as Brian alluded to, will remain for this phase of the project untouched.
Thank you. Other questions for the applicant? I have one, we had some discussion here about impervious surface coverages and such. Do you know and have access to the amount of imperviousness that you're designing for the shoreland portion, the shoreland zone of the project? Do you know that offhand,
For
Evan?
the portion north of the line.
North of the line,
No, I
correct?
don't know that number off the top of my head, but we could certainly calculate that. It'd be pretty easy to do.
Trying to eyeball that here and with the discussion around the 25% figure, and then how to, for the shoreline ordinance controls, and then how do you think about it more broadly for the development as a whole? And then to the points of lighting, I did not, there's a lot of super fine print even when you blow these drawings up on the computer, and so I did not see what you had intended for the height of your outdoor lighting poles. Do you know what your,
20'5", I think it said, Mike.
what was it again, please?
20'5"
20?
on the outer pole, on the upper, on the taller poles. That'd be S2s, I believe.
See if I can find that sheet here. Probably down there.
20'10" or 20'5", I think.
I can share with you from the people we serve, having lights shine into their windows is not a good thing.
Right.
So all these light poles will be designed to have the light move down. I think there's only 2 areas on the campus where we're even proposing a wall pack, and it's on the north end where there's no development. So we don't think it would impede anybody's sight lines.
And I will point out, Mr. Chair, as well as also when you're looking at the lighting schedule, they do list pretty much all of their lighting within the facility as dimmable as well.
Correct, okay. I'm just trying to think about, the PUD being a different zoning tool than the standard districts. The lighting ordinance doesn't fit very well. And, so as I think about the character of the development, the emphasis on the residential features, as Mr. Kelm just mentioned, it strikes me that a lower pole height would be more appropriate, I think, and consistent with our residential recommendations in the lighting ordinance. And so that's basically a 13-foot high standard, and then there's an as you had defined your shielded lighting and so forth, there's an allowance to come up to, I believe, 17. So I would encourage that we think about using the residential standard for the lighting height here, and there may be good exceptions to that, and those things that would make sense for particular areas in the development, but given the fact that this is more of a residential, perhaps you might think about around maybe the daycare area or something. If in the winter months you might want to provide better lighting, higher lighting there, for example. But I would encourage you to think about that. Okay, so those are my points. Any other questions? Paul, do you have?
This is more of a comment. I actually had the opportunity to visit the Country Manor site in St. Joseph with a bunch of city staff here. What was that? Probably 3 years ago, right at the beginning of this. And just wanted to comment on what an impressive facility that it is. Really emphasizing the natural landscape around the facility for the users was quite impressive to me. They really concentrated on making sure that they didn't turn it into a commercial looking zone. It was, the wildlife, the natural landscape was very impressive in my mind, along with the facility itself. So that's just a comment more than anything, is that I know all the city staff, when we visited your facility, were very impressed with the way that you guys did things from that perspective. So, yep.
Save me a seat.
Okay.
In the very near future.
The way I'm aging, man.
Mr. Chair, one more question.
Yes, Mr.
for the
Erickson.
engineer, if I could. From a municipal investment standpoint, I saw sewer and water, electric's already stub, or up to the property. And I believe, this is more of a clarification, the private road, it would be a private road out to Beaver Dam, correct? Okay.
Yep, and we have been in coordination with Crow Wing County also. They are requiring the addition of some turn lanes at that location, much like you see further to the south. That would also be an investment that Country Manor would have to make in that county road section to, there is a cost share agreement that the county has. I think they pay 25% of those improvements. And so 75% of the cost borne on the developer.
Okay, thanks.
Evan, could you go to drawing C3.0? I think it's just one of the ones with the topography there, looking specifically at block 1, lot 2, or whatever the reference number is there. I'm curious about how your, that one will do there. If you could zoom into the topography there where the road is coming in, I'm curious how you're connecting that steep slope to the wetland on the south, to the wetlands to the north. Have you got, is that culverts in there, or?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so there is kind of a ravine running through there that you're describing.
Right.
Effectively, there's some area here that's built up on either side, and then there's an overflow culvert there. So it's designed to allow for a certain amount of backup in that ditch area so that it's not just simply running completely through there. So we're managing some of that stormwater within that ditch, and then if it overflows, and then continues on naturally as it would have minus the road. But so from a flow standpoint, we're actually managing a little of that as it crosses. So we're dipping down in grade and then back up a little bit still. So it's not completely flat and filled in per se, but it's does have that in a ditch and culvert there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. David, question for you. Has there been a natural heritage review of this particular site that's sort of environmental sensitive species kinds of analysis? Are you aware of
Not
that?
to my knowledge. Do you know anything, Paul?
I don't believe so. The only time that would be required is if we were in some sort of wetland permit type of situation where an environmental or sensitive species would be something that would be required of that, especially if we're working in waters of the United States. But this particular site has no wetlands near or around it, and that is not a requirement to have that as part of a development like this.
Thank you. And are you folks aware of any, or have aware of any rare features or anything like that on the site?
That I'm aware of that's shown up on any of the information we received so far.
Okay. All righty. Any other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Woodward.
going back to the utilities, and perhaps this is a question for our city engineer. Are our current infrastructure, the infrastructure that we have in place, is that currently set up to accommodate this kind of a project going in?
Yeah, so if I may, Mr. Chair, so back when we constructed Riverside Drive and Beaver Dam Road along with Crow Wing County, most everything was oversized for future development in this area. We have a water booster station located down by the Brainerd Amateur Hockey Foundation to pressurize the system all the way up to the end, which terminates near Wise Road. All the sewer mains are oversized to handle any additional flows which we would get from residential development in this area. So, you know, that's all calculated at the time of construction. And we have no concern whatsoever of size of utilities in this area based on the generally low density residential that we have in this area right now and what the calculations took into consideration when we constructed Beaver Dam Road and Riverside Drive. So there's no concerns from our standpoint.
Would this size of a draw in the system reduce the life expectancy of our current infrastructure?
No, no.
Very good. All right, at this point in time, we'd entertain any questions from the audience. Is there anybody that would care to speak to this project? If so, please step up to the microphone up here at the podium, state your name, your address, and if you could address your comments to me, please.
Troy Nelson, 9208 Twin Street. Just a question on what is the buffer between where the buildings and the roads stop and our property lines? And then as a property owner butting up to it, for future development, what is the buffer that would be there for any future development? And, you know, some of them are multi-level. Would that be something that would be allowed as we get closer to our development? Or would that have to stay in the back? Is my
Very good,
question.
Mr. Nelson. Would Evan or Ryan, either of you be able to address those questions? What's your planned intent to, and these would be specific to the south property line, if I'm
Sure.
correctly interpreting.
From a mission and philosophy standpoint, having a buffer is very important to us. Having those sight lines for folks, so when they look out, you're not building on buildings. So without having measurements and setback requirements, that's the philosophy. Originally, we proposed patio homes on the corner that is not developed right now, and that would be single story at this time. To say that we wouldn't come back and potentially look at a two-story, we can't forecast that. We look at the demand, but at this point in time, memory care addition, so that 18 units you actually saw in the one print, additional square foot, we'd be looking at more of those units. And then we would evaluate what the people in this area are telling us would be the next move. We have never put up a building more than 2 stories for that very sake of intimidating the residential areas. But I would just tell you, we would be very open to do what the right thing is for this area to make sure that we all live in harmony together. You know, the other thing I just mentioned is you see this campus, it's acres. We are going to have, I know that road doesn't continue from the south to the north, but on our campuses, we always embrace the neighborhood to utilize our walking paths and our areas for their enjoyment too. You'll see a number of sitting areas and different sight lines that we're going to produce with this, and we always enjoy it when we can embrace and be part of the community.
So one thing to add to that is the building's really intended to be able to first shot at an actual connection to the building is really more up here, intentionally off of that knuckle. So even if it were to develop, the natural extension that we're planning is in that quadrant. Anything past that's probably really not in the cards specifically to be connected to the building per se, in the sense that I think, again, as Brian said, that, you know, their goal in having the campus together and
Correct,
connected. And that's where our connection would potentially happen to. We don't know what that would be, just if there's, you know, a hallway that kind of is planned if there ever was a need for an area right there.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, David.
Also to address Mr. Nelson's concerns, there would also be, for any future development, again, the planning commission here is to consider this development. So when the day comes that the Country Manor seeks to expand, we're going to end up right back in this room doing this exact same thing, and you'll be able to express those same concerns and make sure that any future development is also adequately screened from the Northtown development.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would care to speak on this subject? If you would, please state your name and address and address your questions to me.
My name is Jeanette Houle. I live at 15095 Warrior Avenue in Northtown, obviously. I guess I just have a couple questions on, you know, quite honestly, when I first saw this, I was like, absolutely not in our neighborhood, you know, because we moved out there to be out of town and now you're moving town to us. And I certainly understand. I love the proposal. I think that it's great. I hate the placing of it because in my brain, not hate, sorry, that's a strong word. I guess I'm a little surprised at the placing of it, just for the simple fact is in my mind, you put your the higher density housing towards the bigger streets, and then you punch in your single family homes behind it. So what you, and we essentially have that out there. We have Edgewood Vista, already on, right off of Beaver Dam Road. And then when you head into Northtown, we have some townhomes there. And then we have a gentleman that owns, and I think down the road, possibly he'll put in some more townhome type like things there. So it's already set up in my mind that way. And then of course, all the single housing is behind that. So then you guys come in and you actually punch your way through that, where that single housing would be, and you put your multi-housing behind it. So I guess that's what alarmed me in the first place, is I thought, oh, these poor guys over on Twin Street are gonna have, you know, this big complex back there. So, but I understand, you know, I understand the whole design process behind it, because you want that acreage for your facility, right? So anyway, so I guess a couple of questions, sorry, that was a long diatribe into my questions. My questions are, you have after school childcare, so how are you going to address the busing need that you have in that? Another one is, what is affordable? What do you mean by affordable housing?
So, you know, maybe Ms. Houle, if you could address those questions to me.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, and-
So I guess I would like to wrap my head around, what does the busing look like? I'm a little bit more concerned with if they do invariably punch through Warrior and they punch through Wild into the back parts of their property, what would that look like with the traffic coming in and out? Right now, if you look in our neighborhood, we have 4/10 of a mile of sidewalk in that whole neighborhood. That's all we have, 4/10 of a mile. We have a lot of walkers. Some of my concerns also stem on the fact that we make, and I say we because I see people out walking all the time. We walk around Beaver Dam, and to go onto Beaver Dam already is taking our life into our hands, just to make that loop up Riverside Drive and then back around McKay into Northwood again, or Northtown. So I guess those are some of my concerns too, is that do we get a walking path along Beaver Dam to keep us a little more safe with the increase in traffic? And then of course, I look at it again too, when you're coming off of 49, when you're coming off of Wise Road, you come and you're gonna be turning into that property right at that corner. And already it's a blind, it's already, it's a kind of a traffic concern already there when you're coming around that corner, even turning into Northtown. So now you have another turn. I'm sorry, I am married to an engineer. Can any of you figure that out? So anyway, so those are some of the questions I think I would have that I would like to see addressed tonight or in the future anyway. So I know, I'm sorry, I threw a lot at you.
Yeah, thank you. What I'm hearing is you're thinking about just the proximity of the higher density. Typically, you're seeing that closer to the main road. That's not the case in this one. You're also asking about or concerned about traffic related to the school. Should these future public right-of-ways come up from Northtown up into the project, if I'm getting the right
Yep, busing of that after-school kids.
And then just in general, just the added traffic that you might see on Beaver Dam that.
Yes,
and-
or
and
possibly.
the pedestrian aspects here. So
Yep, and
thank you.
possibly future into Northtown, just to keep the pedestrians walking in that whole area safe. Yeah,
Very
so,
good,
thank you.
So, Mr. Kelm, could you maybe kind of pick at some of those, maybe kind of work down the list and
Yeah.
thoughts on that, or what your impressions would be on that, and then staff might have some comment as well.
Sure. In regards to, you know, the number of people living there, the high density, average age of the person that we typically see on our campus is 85 years old. About 30% of the people you're going to see in these apartments have a spouse, have somebody, a loved one that lives with them. About half of the people that live there will not own a car anymore. Of the people that own a car, you'll probably see 10% of them that will venture out more than once or twice a week. So these folks are looking for a community to live. This is their place where they're going to reside. When they're out walking, as I was sharing with you before, their ability to see, their ability to hear, their ability to walk is not quite what it was in most cases. So we do not want the high traffic areas for them. And if you would have the opportunity to go online and see Woodcrest or our other campus, we believe that's really important for them. In regards to the childcare, there's 30 school-age children, and we haven't sat down with the district to see if their buses would drop off or not. At Sartell campus, we own and operate a bus, And we have 2 buses that come in and out of the campus in the morning and then in the afternoon. We have 60 children that we serve there in school age, so it would be pretty minimal. So outside of our staffing that comes in to service these folks and the mom and the parents that come and pick up, that's where the bulk of our traffic would come from. 1 or 2 trucks a week, garbage trucks, and then a couple supply trucks come in. So the traffic flow, pretty minimal, if you want to compare it to other business districts, but we would have some during the pickup drop-off periods in the start of shifts and end of shifts.
And then, Mr. Chair, I believe Ms. Hool also had a question about what you consider affordable for your units as well.
Thank you. Everything is market rate, so I'd start with that. It's not HUD housing or anything like that. And what I meant by affordable, it will be less expensive than the high-end apartments. Typically in senior housing, you're gonna see a large range. In our campus, you're gonna see ranges starting in the upper teens, all the way up to, at the Sartell campus, our high-end units are $4,200 a month. Now that includes services, some services attached to it. So our more affordable apartments right now, we would, not knowing what material prices and labor is gonna do to us, I would say that those prices would be in that $1,700 to $2,100 range a month.
Very good. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would care to speak to this proposal? If so, please approach the podium, your name, address, and address your questions to me.
Hi, Mark James, 9209 Twin Street in Northtown. I'm just a little more specific on the traffic flow. That is a dangerous curve on Beaver Dam. And I do understand that, your residents, most of them aren't going to be driving, but you do have, shift changes with the staff. And also the daycare, I think, is kind of a concern. We've seen, solo daycare in our neighborhood, and we've seen the traffic impact with that. So I guess my specific question is there been an actual, traffic flow or crash study along with this planned project? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. Brian, or
I'm not sure I could answer the study portion of
Yeah,
that.
and I'm going to probably look over at Paul here
Yeah,
quick, because
that's
my
all
guess is, there's no specific study in place that I am aware of. One thing I do want to note about the daycare component, which I understand would be the traffic come and go more component, that was actually a city request that I think we were welcome to. City was very encouraging of having the daycare component, as Country Manor had that in their campus portfolio. So that was actually stemmed from a strong city request due to the lack of some daycare in the area. And obviously Country Manor's mission with marrying some of these seniors with the daycare too. So that part of it was an important element that was actually, I think, part of the campus development element and campus planning from the get-go, but I certainly understand the traffic portion of that, absolutely. To the study part, I'll have to divert it to.
Yep.
Paul, are you able to think of similar examples of entries that might be similar to the Beaver Dam, and maybe how those are managed? And
Yeah, so when we think about these roads in this area, so this Northtown development is surrounded by county roads. So we have Wise Road on the north, Beaver Dam on the west, Riverside Drive on the south, and McKay Road on the east. Now, the city manages a small portion of McKay Road up to the Northtown development. So really, all of this traffic conversation falls in the county's jurisdiction. Now, when Country Manor originally approached us, one of the questions that the county did ask is, what is kind of the traffic generation for this type of campus? And that's where the turn lane conversation came from. You'll see further south at that senior housing development, they do have a left-hand turn lane, which does prevent the rear end crashes that you typically see with people stopping on a higher speed county road. I'm not exactly sure with the curvature of the roadway that you were alluding to, but that left-hand turn lane should resolve 99.9% of any rear end possible collisions. The county has a standard for their turn lane construction that they have incorporated in their drawings. I will say that also in the future here, just a little bit further off of the project, we have better traffic control devices going in with, so Crow Wing County's putting in a roundabout at the intersection of Wise Road and Beaver Dam. The city is currently working on a roundabout further south by the Civic Center. So we do have multiple better traffic control flow devices going into this area. And so from a traffic flow perspective, when you're talking about Northtown itself, we have the right-of-way drawn in for future development. We can't speak to what that could potentially be, but my guess is in this area, it's going to be a residential use. I think, not speaking on behalf of Country Manor, but their opinion has always been that they would like to maintain private roads for themselves, and the only access out being the one to Beaver Dam. Without knowing what the future holds with those two right-of-ways, the one on Warrior that heads straight up to the north parcels or the easterly side, not having my crystal ball, but my anticipation would be a residential type development in that area and fairly low traffic generation due to the residential nature of this area. So that's just my, I guess, 10,000 foot level, but without knowing what the potential future development could be, it's kind of, putting the proverbial, yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I may add to those elements
Yes,
as well.
David, go ahead.
So first I'll continue what Paul was saying about those two spurs coming off of Warrior and Wild. Again, as Paul alluded to earlier, we asked for those to be in there. Again, just more of just doing the city's due diligence, looking towards the future of we have to plan for what future development may potentially happen. Again, there's no intention of putting those roads in at any time of this development. When you look to the north, if you look to the parcels immediately to the north of them, what development could happen there in the future, I think would be limited to residential, especially when you look at the parcel immediately north of this main parcel is pretty much all wet. So I really don't foresee any future, and it's landlocked. I don't see much future development there. Maybe some to the parcel that's immediately off of Beaver Dam, but then they would likely have access off of Beaver Dam. So that part, again, no, can't make any promises, but I don't foresee that need off of Warrior anytime in the near future. For development to the east, there's a 40-acre lot directly to the east of this parcel. That in the future could potentially see development. It's currently not in the city limits. It's in Crow Wing County for assessment right now. If that were to be developed, I would foresee, again, because of the surrounding nature, it would be a residential development. And even that situation, while we are platting a right-of-way that could access it, I think our intention or our belief is that main access would actually be had off of McKay in such a situation where that 40-acre parcel that you can see there would be developed. So again, most of those right-of-ways are there as are doing our due diligence, but chances of them being needed are, I think, slim. I do also want to point out, Mr. Chair, just kind of address the childcare situation as well. I was not here at that when Country Manor first approached the city. I joined the city about just a couple months later, but I do believe that, as Evan pointed out, yes, that was a strong push by the city for them to consider that, considering they have done the child care in other locations. And even more recently, the Brainerd Lakes Area Development Corporation, in conjunction with the Initiative Foundation and other partners, some being the city, the school district, and some other local businesses, recently did a child care survey where they really surveyed much of the county, surveying businesses as well as individuals about child care needs in the county. And just as we're seeing everywhere else in the state of Minnesota and the country, there is a dearth of child care options. So this child care facility, while not necessarily large, is a needed service in our county and would serve especially the residents of Brainerd well.
Thank you, David. Is there anyone else that wishes, Go ahead, Paul.
I think there were some other questions that I'm thinking about the traffic and the pedestrian stuff, or the pedestrian questions that you had. I think the city is very committed to future extensions of trails. Being that these are county roads, that would be a conversation we would need to have with Crow Wing County. We did recently take over the portion of Riverside Drive from Washington Street up to Beaver Dam Road. So that is now a city street. We are currently, we're going to be restriping that to a 3-lane section, which it'll get rid of the 4-lane and it'll have bike lanes on both sides at this point. You know, future, I could see a connection up to the Paul Bunyan Trail. That's a very good corridor to get from the downtown Civic Center area. We're incorporating a trail with our improvement right now that we're doing with the roundabout. Future trail extension, bike lanes, whatever that entails, but I could foresee that being a very good connecting corridor up Riverside, up Beaver Dam to connect into the Paul Bunyan to kind of complete that trail loop. So that might address one of your concerns with along the pedestrian lines. As far as Northtown is concerned, there is only, I think, one sidewalk in Northtown. That is some concerns that I think the Walkable Bikeable Committee has also kind of brought forward, and I don't know if there's any recommendations in their plan to incorporate future sidewalks in that area. I don't have the plan in front of me, but the Walkable Bikeable Committee is very in tune with what the needs are, and they have a plan in place right now that kind of fills in the sidewalk gaps and looks at areas where people are walking a lot. And so that's an area that I think they should also consider, because I have received complaints from other residents in that area that there are a lot of walkers up there and there needs to be some sort of connection. The city does own a 30-foot cartway to the north of your properties, I believe. There's a 30-foot sliver of property through there. That was kind of purchased by the city as a dedicated trail corridor at some point in the future that could connect between the properties. And as I think Country Manor said, they're always willing to share those walkways and trails around their facility as being a part of that neighborhood up there. So, there's been a big change, I think, recently with the city that more focused on walking and biking and safety of pedestrians rather than focused on transportation with vehicles. I think, every project that we do in engineering now, we're considering basically pedestrians on the same level as a car. So I think between that and future projects or future special projects with trails, I think that those will be coming through in the future, certainly.
Mr. Chair, also going off of what Paul said too, even the planning commission themselves, you may not know that the city has undertaken a comprehensive rewrite of the city's zoning code, which is the planning commission is working through right now. And I think some of the early things the planning commission has already been discussing are things such as, when it comes again with a focus of walkability, of making recommendations to the city council to include in the new code, that when areas such as Northtown that were developed with not having a lot of sidewalks or a lot of walkability, as they continue either to be developed or, for example, when streets need to be reconstructed into the future, that sidewalks are taken into account and implemented in those plans when those reconstructions happen, to kind of fix that issue of not having enough sidewalks there, and eventually down the road implementing more sidewalks into those neighborhoods that do not currently have them.
Thank you, staff. Anyone else care to speak and ask questions about this project? Is there anyone else that would care to address the commission on this project?
And we do not have anyone online other than Mr. Brad Wilkening, who is a member of the Country Manor team.
Thank you. All right, hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing at 8:20 and bring that back to the commission for discussion. So any comments or questions or points of discussion here?
Mr. Chair, are you going to be looking for recommendations or conditions a little further here?
I
Or
would
do you want
be,
that
as
now?
part of this conversation, I would like to hear thoughts about what there might be appropriate conditions to put onto the,
You want those now?
this would be a good time to bring those up.
Perfect. if I may, Mr. Chair.
You may.
I guess the one thing that I would like to see as a condition is, and we've talked a little bit about this, is a gearing of the lighting, especially the exterior lighting, towards a more residential type format. This is especially pertaining to heights, temperatures, and shielding, to be reviewed by our staff. Our staff is, very capable of looking at the submittals on the lighting, but my leaning would be more towards a residential style of lighting for this campus versus a commercial lighting style, which it seems like we've got a couple of both kind of going here, but that's the condition that I think I'm coming away with here that I'd like to see move forward. And with that, I'll pass it along.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Other comments or thoughts about conditions? Ms. Woodward, you got one?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the parking formula and the need for that number of parking spaces and where that comes from. But I can't quite come up with the math in my head.
Mr. Chair, more of
Mr.
a
Erickson.
comment for discussion on the impervious. Do we need to, I guess that was built into staff's recommendation at the 60%. We need to make a decision on that. I guess I feel like staff's done a really good job vetting this project with the findings of fact and everything that's been presented in the packet. I like how it's laid out. I think I'm comfortable with that 60%. Like your question of where does that come from? Is it, we've adopted the state's shoreland, or what's it called, shoreland management plan. So then we have to, how can we deviate from it then?
So
maybe could you elaborate a little bit more on that piece?
the 25% applies for areas within the shoreline district. As you can see, if you see the hashed line on the current slide that's up, that is on those, everything north of that line is what's in the shoreland. Everything south of that line is not in shoreland. So in essentially what you're having in this development is you're having that kind of that awkwardness of partial of the development's in shoreland, but it has a certain regulation, and then part of it is not. So what we're trying to do here is balance the two. So I'm gonna pull my sheet up here. So in that situation, and then you have to add to that, you have what I kind of mentioned earlier, where in all of our zones, if it's a residential rezoned district, there's a 60% impervious restriction. And then in our business and commercial zones, there is no impervious restriction. You know, assuming that stormwater is accounted for, they could in theory have 100% impervious in a commercial or industrial district. So what we try to do is massage this whole situation. Again, having looked at it, having gotten some outside counsel on this situation, what we're essentially doing here is, as staff, what we did, and actually I'll try to see if I can pull up my spreadsheet. We calculated, first, staff calculated what is the square footage or the area in the shoreland district. And if you give me just a second here, I'm going to pull up my spreadsheet and I can walk you through all the numbers. Here we go. It's going to pull up here.
I will add to what David's pulling up right now. Being that they are managing 100% of their stormwater on site, the impervious isn't as much of an indicator of what we should be considering, because if we were dumping 5 acres of stormwater into a storm sewer that might be undersized, that's the main reason we manage stormwater, is for that reason. We don't want a commercial district coming in, not managing their stormwater on their property, dumping 100% of it into the storm sewer, and then having flooding issues in the future. With this project and the soil conditions that are up here, I anticipate that after a rain event, you might have half-filled ponds, and it'll be infiltrated in half an hour to an hour. So being that they're managing 100% of their stormwater on site, I don't know that this impervious conversation needs to be as detailed as what it is because of that.
And to Paul's point, and I have my numbers out here, a lot of times when you look at the shoreland ordinance, it's assuming residential, so it's assuming they're not managing stormwater at all. They're assuming a house that's right on a river or right on some other body of water, and they're not
Dumping
managing.
water
And
right
they're
into that water
dumping.
line.
In this situation, they're managing.
So with that said, Mr. Chair, I mean, I don't even need to put everybody through the numbers. If everyone else is comfortable with that, or if you have.
And that's where we as staff, honestly, based again as Paul indicated, I think we could go just fine without even indicating a specific impervious. We wanted to call that out because we felt it needed to be mentioned that it is in shoreland and there are generally restrictions. I think it would be just fine to not even necessarily call it out as a condition, saying it must be a certain percentage because they're managing all of their stormwater on site, and it shouldn't be a problem at all. But if the commission wanted to call it out, this is where we were making that recommendation of what we think would potentially be allowed or a good mix. Again, when you take into account again Country Manor's intention of keeping green spaces and the emphasis on green spaces, it even more mitigates the concern from I think Paul and I's perspective of any stormwater concerns or future development where they're suddenly making this, for lack of a better term, a concrete jungle.
Thank you.
I think if you were to apply, if you were to take the 60% and design this development on the shoreline portion of the parcel, I think we would get crosswise pretty quickly with DNR saying, even though the stormwater piece is there, I think we may be called to task on a process to be able to work through how we would justify that. And I think we could do that, you know. But I think what we're talking about with the 60% is the overall project development here. The site plan we're looking at right now, we're saying not to exceed a 60% imperviousness. And, you know, eyeballs differ between different individuals. I certainly would like to know what that designed impervious is in that shoreland area, and I think you fellas felt like you'd be able to say, yeah, I need to go back to the office and run a quick number or two, and I can have it. That would be helpful to have as an additional piece here as we make recommendations to City Council, just simply to say that this is the designed imperviousness in the shoreland. We feel, based on the stormwater plan, that runoff concerns are adequately managed. We think overall for the site, a 60% imperviousness makes sense as a threshold to work with. So I think it's just a valuable piece of information to be able to bring to council as it's just part of the overall package. And we don't, as you say, I think we don't need to necessarily construct a condition, just to get a piece of information to be able to bring forward to council on this.
Mr. Chair, can I add something to that real quickly also? The campus has been positioned to the northerly part of this parcel. So one could argue that if more stringent restrictions were put on, for instance, the impervious, the campus may then just want to be shifted to the south out of the zone, which to me is counter to everything that I've heard tonight, which is the buffer zone between the neighbors and the campus also. So I think that we've kind of found the common middle ground here is kind of how I feel about this. They've shifted to the north. I think that fits with the buffer zone. It's put them more in the impact zone of the shoreland, but again, it's total lot mass, so I'm comfortable with it, and I think that keeping it to the north is more in fitting with the entire design and the surrounding neighbors. Thank you.
With that, I mean, if Mr. Chair, if I may, with just an eyeball look at that, I would almost anticipate that we would even be approaching the 25% threshold or less in this circumstance. Just eyeballing it and seeing how much green space they have on that northern portion, this might be a moot point either way with the 25%.
My eyeball says 30%.
I'm going to go with 33.1.
But that's it. So it would be helpful to have that number. But I think we're close, and so I think it helps in that regard. So, other thoughts on any conditions? We have, lighting is really, I think, one that we've addressed here specifically. Again, color, height, and there was a third aspect.
Color, height, and shielding.
Shielding, thank you.
It's basically in our residential
Right.
lighting standards.
Hearing none other, I don't want to put this in the form of a condition, but it's my impression that there are in fact natural heritage elements in this site or proximate to this site that may have impacts to construction activity. I don't know that your infrastructure is really going to be problematic, but I think it would be wise to contact the DNR's non-game program and maybe ask, here's the site, what things should we think about, and that probably would be more about your construction phase and probably Corey, that's probably your world at that point, but things to think about in that way. So I don't want to put that in the form of a condition, but I think that would be wise guidance to you to reach out to DNR's non-game program and ask them if there are certain things, actions and things that you should take in the construction phase here. So with that, are there any other comments, questions, conditions? So David, do you have the gist of the conditions?
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Chair, I've got the lighting one, fully understand that. With impervious, is that condition you just want them to provide us with that calculation?
Yes.
Okay, but not necessarily putting a limit on it, just providing the calculation. So moving forward, Mr. Chair, again, as part of this process, we will need the commission to consider two things separately. The first is the Planning Commission should consider the requested rezoning from RA Rural Agriculture to Planned Unit Development. And then the second would be to consider recommending this development stage plan conditional on one, the elements that you have listed here. I'm also recommending from staff that it be conditional on the rezoning of the property. The reason we are recommending that is that the ordinance does mention that planned unit development shouldn't be approved prior to the rezoning. And generally, again, if there's rezoning is not happening, we have a concern with that. So just, and that's something we've done before, that it just also be conditional on the rezoning being approved by the city council as well.
Very good. Thank you, David. So at this point, I am looking first for a motion to approve the rezoning request from Rural Ag to Planned Unit Development District. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Yeager.
Well, first, I'd just like to say thank you very much for Country Manor for reaching out to the city of Brainerd and wanting to be a part of the city. This is, for me, very exciting, and this is exactly the types of projects that we would like to see and have as neighbors. Based upon the findings of fact and what I've seen here tonight, this project very much so seems to embrace the harmony of both our comprehensive plan as well as our FLU plan. So I would like to make the motion to rezone this parcel from RA to a PUD district.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, Woodward second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, that part is done. And next, looking to receive a motion to approve the development stage plan that's been presented tonight, conditional on the approved rezoning of the property and the conditions of lighting that were mentioned here. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved. Yeager.
Yeager, is there a second?
Second.
All right, Woodward second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, thank you very much, David. Next steps, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So moving forward, both the rezoning per the city charter, that does require 2 readings by the city council. The first reading will be held by the city council during the regular meeting on Monday, June 7th. And the development stage plan will also be considered by city council on Monday, June 7th as well.
All right, Mr. Kelm, thank you, you and your team. Good luck. We'll see you again.
Okay, thank you very much.
All righty. So with that, I believe I'm looking now for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Ms. Woodward, motion, second?
I'll second.
All right, yeah, you're second. They're gonna switch roles now. So, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.